Danheng and Blade clearly have a rich backstory between them, as we see through Danheng's nightmares and the fight between Blade and Danheng. Through the quests we've seen and the in-game text, we can start to piece together what they've been through that causes the hostility that seems to be between them. The past. High Cloud Quintet. Many years ago, Danheng and Blade were both part of the High Cloud Quintet, a legendary group in xianzhou history, alongside Jingyuan, Jingliu, and Heng, also known as the Foxian Traveler or Foxian Girl. At this time, Danheng was known as Danfeng, and Blade was known as Yingxing. This is shown through a mirage echo at the Scale Gorge waterscape, where the middle-aged voice sounds similar to Blade's.
If your people knew that you had brought me here, there would be great unrest.
We also learn from this mirage echo that at this time, yingxing was the only short-life species within the High Cloud Quintet, which corroborates with other in-game texts about a short-life craftsman in the High Cloud Quintet. This High Cloud Quintet may be who Blade is speaking about in his prophecy.
Of 5 people, 3 must pay a price.
The 3 people that pay a price may be Danheng,
You are one of them.
Blade himself, and either Jingliu or Heng. From Blade's character story, we know that Blade was a weapons forger in the past. He had landed in Xianzhou to study craftsmanship and created weapons for all 4 other members of the High Cloud Quintet, including the spear that Danfeng uses, Cloud Piercer. He may have been the weapons forger known as the Furnace Master. The Furnace Master created Star Rail Reverie, the weapon that Jingyuan holds.
His glaive is no ordinary weapon. It was forged by the Furnace Master using embers from the Rainbow Arbiter's star-destroying Lux arrow. It is known as Starfall Reverie.
The Furnace Master is described in the Arrow of the Star Chaser description as the only person that has the rights to reforge the shards for those who are worthy. As described in the bracer piece of the relic set, Passerby of Wandering Cloud, there are 2 people who have sparred together and had drinks under the moon. This relic set seems to match Blade's aesthetic and what we currently know about his lore, and so he's very likely to be one of the 2 people. The other person is someone that Blade believes he is destined to reunite with, and someone he has long years of grudges and hatred with. The other person is also likely to be a Vidyadhara, as the bracer is described as being made by a master artisan from this dragon race. Therefore, it's possible that this other person is Danheng, along with Blade's negative feelings to Danfeng described in the light cone Nowhere to Run, and Blade talking about meeting Danfeng again in his character story. There's also an official art of Danheng drinking under the moon, though that may be a bit of a reach. Although this bracer set mentions having a pair, this particular set only shows one side, where some of the other relic sets do show pairs. Maybe we'll have another relic set showing the matching bracer? The past. The beloved. Danfeng and Yingxing seem to be closely related to some events that happened to someone called the beloved. There seems to be 2 main points that happen to them. The first is that they become a monstrosity, likely due to Mara, and the second is that Danfeng killed them. From the water mirage of Danfeng and Yingxing, we can see that Danfeng snuck Yingxing into the Scale Gorge waterscape, and he may have done this in order to research immortality. The Vidyadhara species are the only species in which their immortality is healthy, aka not affected by Mara. Even the long-life species of most of the xianzhou luofu will be stricken by Mara at some point in their later life, as highlighted by the in-game text. There are 3 theories of who the beloved might be referring to. The first is Blade himself, who does seem to cover all the boxes. He died by Danfeng's hand and could be seen as having become a monstrosity. The in-game text describes the drought of draconic surge, a possible way to achieve immortality in which the main ingredient is a live bone marrow sample from the Vidyadhara species, which could explain why Danfeng was the first face that Blade saw upon being resurrected. The second is that it may have been Heng. In this case, she might have died in battle, and Yingxing and Danfeng might have worked together to bring her back to life. There is also another water mirage at the Scape Gorge waterscape of a woman asking to see how she is faring. This could be Jingliu looking for Heng. Either way, Danshu mentions that she was tasked by the seat of divine foresight themselves to find a cure for the drought of draconic surge. This means that Jingyuan could be the person that asked for this, further suggesting the High Cloud Quintet's involvement in the immortality substance. The third theory is the woman that we see Danfeng talking to, Yuan, though there isn't much more that we seem to know about her at this point in time. The past, Blade's death and immortality. Blade's character story, part 2, describes how Blade dies and comes back to life, waking to a certain certain black-haired individual missing his horns. Danfeng is meant to be guarding the ambrosial arbor, and so using it to bring Blade back to life goes against the xianzhou luofu's rules, where they support the hunt and oppose the aeon of abundance. Danfeng was placed in the shackling prison likely after committing the sin of either killing the beloved or through bringing Blade back to life, or both. Jingyuan banishes or exiles them both and all future incarnations from the xianzhou. This is probably the best outcome for Danheng, as it prevents him from dying in whatever proper death way that immortals die, maybe through a mind-shattering or a soul-shattering process, and allows him to live a life outside of the xianzhou luofu. Blade's banishment may be because he assisted Danfeng in turning the beloved into a monstrosity, or because he joined the Stellaron Hunters. It seems unclear at the moment. Present day. The first scene we see of Blade is through Danheng's nightmares. This bracer piece in the relic set talks about how its matching pair creates telepathic connections with the other person, which may be how these nightmares happened. As suggested in the 4-star light cone Nowhere to Run and in the live stream, Blade wants to kill Danheng. He also seeks a funeral for himself.
Not just vengeance, a funeral.
However, death for immortals like them may not be the same as a normal death, and Blade and Danheng have both technically died and neither can be killed. As such, it could suggest the idea of something like a descent to an abyss similar to Genshin, or a soul-shattering or mind-shattering process. From the quest, we can see that Blade believes Danheng is Danfeng. He believes that Danfeng changed his name and appearance to hide from Blade and his vengeance. Maybe because Blade saw Danfeng outside of his dragon form when he was resurrected. Blade sees both their deaths as the only way they can repay their debt.
音乐君，我们的果报何时来临？我们欠下的债如何偿还？
Their debt possibly being Blade's resurrection and immortality, or their joint research and the parts they played in making the beloved a monstrosity and killing them. However, Danheng sees himself as a reincarnation. Though Vidyadhara rebirths are meant to create a completely new person that is devoid of any past memory, Danheng does seem to have some memories that Danfeng had. Danheng, even before having his imbibitor lunae form revealed, seems to at least partially recognize who Blade was. At the sight of Blade's hologram, Danheng tells Himeko that the man is dangerous, and that it seems his burden has caught up to him. There are 3 theories as to why Danheng holds his past memories today. The first is that Danheng is a special case simply because he's the High Elder. Retaining those memories may be necessary for this role in order for him to remember how to protect the ambrosial arbor. Second theory includes an interaction we see with the Vidyadhara egg at the Scale Gorge waterscape, where you can learn that lovers sometimes secretly put a jade pendant in their mouth so that the lovers can recognize each other in the next life. Danheng and Blade both have jade pieces on them in their outfits. The third theory is that Danheng is Danfeng, and Blade was partially right. Danheng may have gone through a molting rebirth, hinted through various in-game texts such as in the A Night Stranger quest, and Blade seeing a less mature version of Danfeng at his resurrection. This has been described as not a proper rebirth, but possibly still one that includes a Vidyadhara egg. This makes Danheng an unreliable narrator. What might have happened is that when he came out of the Vidyadhara egg, he might not know what he had gone through was the molting process, and thought he was reborn as per the usual process. I do find myself being a little biased to the third theory just because I think it would be really interesting and make the characters a lot more dimensional. The idea that the characters we follow themselves may not even know the full truth makes it feel like we are investigating and finding out the truth with them. And finally, there are 2 little miscellaneous tidbits. The first is that Blade's bounty is 8.13 billion, which could be in reference to the Chinese year of the water snake at 813 years. And the second is that in the Todd Riordan quest, there is a little Easter egg where you can see Blade at the Scale Gorge waterscape, and he asks if Danfeng Imbibitor Lunae is happy. Oh, that was so much lore! Thank you so much for listening. Is there anything I missed or anything you found interesting? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching!